Before we begin, we're celebrating the launch of our new tier list feature by giving away awesome prizes like a big statue to put on your desk, Mobalytics Premium, and RP. This giveaway will be active until August 31st, and you can find the link to the giveaway pinned by us in the comments section below, so good luck and have fun. We've designed the tier list feature to be your best tool for mastering the meta in League. You can find champions by their skill floor rating, see picks of the patch, easily understand which champions are rising and falling, and much more. We provided additional stats and search options where you can find any champion's rating, even the ones that aren't on the list and are bad. As always, if you have any feedback or suggestions on this new feature, let us know in the comment section below. Alright, let's get started. It's your challenger coach, Adam Moriarty Isles, here to bring you the Mobalytics patch 9.15 tier list. Starting off with the top lane patch notes, we have Malphite, who is getting a slight buff to the slow on his Q, more W cleave damage, and a bug fix where Hunter's Talisman works on his W again. This buff should help out the Rockman as his numbers were just too low post mini rework, and will also open up a chance for him to jungle. Poppy will receive a slight buff to her W move speed, which will allow her to reposition faster to land her E wall stun, and Rumble got a nerf to his overpowered shield by 20 on the base and 30 on the empowered version, so he will no longer be able to easily perma-push waves with no consequences. Moving on to the top lane tier list itself, in S tier we have Garen, Urgot, Yorick, Kled, and my pick of the patch, Illaoi. With the recent nerf to many ranged top laners such as Kennen, Neeko, and Jace, Illaoi the Tentacle Maiden is able to be freely picked up as some of her hardest matchups aren't as difficult anymore. Illaoi is a champion that thrives versus melee champions, and in a meta where having two melee solo laners and a melee jungler is popular, she is smashing her way into S tier, especially after the buff she got a couple patches ago. Pick her whenever you see a lot of melee champions like Renekton, Aurelia, or any tank, and avoid the Teemo matchup if you want to maximize your win rate on her. Kled, who is also S tier, is a pretty hot pickup right now in both competitive play and solo queue, as he is able to smash lane while having great engage to help close out games. He is my second recommendation because, well, I write the script, so if I want to make two recommendations, no one's gonna stop me. As for the rest of the rankings, we are dropping both Neeko and Rumble to B tier due to nerfs impacting their ability to bully the lane phase, because laning power is extremely crucial in solo queue. In top lane in particular, if you get a good matchup with a strong laning champion, you can likely smash lane so hard the enemy top laner tilts and gives you free kills over and over again while they complain and all chat about jungle difference. I'm not targeting anyone in particular, it just seems to happen more often in top lane than the other roles. This kind of behavior is something Neeko used to be able to pull off pre-nerfs, but also the Glacial Augment build path isn't doing as well on most champions due to a lack of damage versus the heavy amount of healing and shielding in the current meta, so she's just taking a hit overall. For the High-ELO list, we have a bunch of changes, but first, our starting lineup. In S tier, we have Kled, Riven, and Akali. For S tier changes, we have Kennen moving down to A tier due to the nerfs hurting his laning phase last patch, but with an AD Kennen build making a comeback in competitive play, he will hold A tier. Rumble will also be moving down to A tier from S due to the nerfs to his scrap shield, and thank you Riot for nerfing that overpowered spammable shield. Next up, it's your boy Kled making it to S tier in both brackets of the tier list. It's been pretty fun watching him in competitive play this last week, as he has some pretty hype pop-off moments, but in solo queue it can be extremely frustrating to play versus a fed Kled with how amazing his dive potential is and skirmish. Plus, just like when you play versus Twisted Fate, all it takes is one person on your team not to know how to play against his ultimate, and they just become a tasty dinner for him all game. With the addition of his anti-healing, he just got a lot better versus meta champions like Renekton, Aatrox, or even Aurelia. In A tier, we got a few champions being moved to B tier. Mordekaiser, Neeko, and Jace all got hit by nerfs last patch, causing their lane dominance to falter. Karma received yet another nerf this patch. Even though she's doing pretty bad in solo queue, she still saw 1 or 2 games in competitive play last week, which apparently is not allowed. No Karma in competitive ever, I guess, so she just got another nerf. The jungle patch rundown is going to include a nerf to my beloved Evelyn's clear speed by nerfing her QCD refund on monsters by 10%. This nerf is meant to hurt her clear speed and is quite light and mostly just meant to keep her power in check, so don't worry, you can keep playing Evelyn. Graves is getting a lot of extra armor from his quick draw, allowing him to be a better skirmisher throughout the game and should make him at least viable. Bugman Kha'Zix is getting an extra 10 base damage on his Q, which might not seem like that much until you realize how many times he actually uses Q a game, or even how many times he uses it per jungle clear. This is going to help him out a lot more than people think. Lee Singa gets a slight buff to his Q damage, which like Kha'Zix will help him, but unlike Kha'Zix, Lee Sin Q can be missed and will miss, so it's not going to be as impactful as Kha'Zix's buff. Moving over to our S tier jungle roster, we have some familiar faces with Vi, Amumu, Volibear, Master Yi, Jax, and Nunu. For A tier changes, we have the addition of Zac, who to my own surprise is doing a lot better recently. Seems like this Majin Buu wannabe wasn't even in his final form and it just took him a couple of episodes, or patches, for him to get used to his ultimate. But for now, he is finally able to properly use his new kit and abuse a lot of the low mobility carries with his amazing ganks. Picking him versus things like Jinx, for example, gives him some really nice gank options and engage choices. Just avoid picking him into Janna and you'll be fine. Now, to no surprise, Flares' pick of the patch will be Kha'Zix. He says that with the boost to his Q damage and isolated it's going to be plus 20 not plus 10, he's going to be doing a lot of damage. This is significantly going to help his early game, which is a little bit weak at the moment pre-6. He says that due to this increased damage, you should be looking to hit level 3 ASAP and invade the enemy jungler, as they'll be isolated and you'll just shred them 1v1. As for itemization, you should be looking to go red smite when versus 2 bruisers, or blue smite if they have a lot of squishies. Also, evolve sequence should be Q, W, and then E in most cases. And though it pains me to actually say this line, we'll be bringing Graves back from the grave to B tier, as this buff should help him out a lot during the early game and will help his clear speed and early duels. Once again, we don't have a lot of jungle changes for the high-elo list. This means that our S tier roster will be Nunu, Rengar, Nidalee, and Elise, who just made it back up. Elise makes it to S tier due to her insane snowball and dive potential in the early game. With so many aggressive laners in the current meta for solo lanes, she is easily able to set up dives even at level 3 to completely crush the game and force an FF at 15 or an NA 20. She does have to watch out for Olaf as a counter pick, but outside of that, she's pretty safe in most matchups. Her other strength is the fact that she's an AP champion in a meta where mid lane has a lot of AD options like Zed, Talon, Qiyana, and even Triss now, which is going to give her even more value in this skirmish heavy meta. This leaves us with our last 2 changes to the list, J Money and Karthus moving to A tier. Jarvan, the 4th of his name, moves up due to his reliability and consistency in the jungle. Karthus is going to move up because his ultimate is extremely powerful when combined with AD assassins that are popular right now like Pyke or Zed. Who knows, Karthus is getting some pretty nice buffs in TFT, so you might be able to pull off an assassin plus Karthus comp there too. Getting into the mid lane patch rundown, we got Galio, who got a nice buff to his passive with increased damage, and it is now affected by CDR. His E Justice Punch also got an increased base damage of 10. Still bad though, and not enough to make him worth recommending. LeBlanc got extra damage on the second part of her E. This is kind of nice, but will ultimately not do anything to help the current LeBlanc out until she gets a different actually good buff that makes her meta again, and then this one will be reverted. Quote me on this. Lissandra gets a nice health buff along with an increased AP ratio on her R, making it more viable for her to go something like Luden's first instead of Protobelt. Too bad she would have already lost lane due to how terrible her QCD is, so she likely won't be strong, but she might make it to B tier just because the meta suits her with all the melee champions. Qiyana got her alt CD nerfed and her E thankfully can be dodged now. She was running rampant in high elo due to how short CD her undodgeable all-in combo was, so this should really help. Next up, Swain got a large range buff on his Q, which is really going to help him mid lane. While Syndra got a buff to her R damage late game because Riot really wants her to be viable at Worlds apparently, same with the constant buffs to Poppy. And Xerath probably gets one of the biggest buffs this patch from mid lane with his ult range going up by a massive amount early game. This is going to help him impact skirmishes and the early game by so much as he won't even have to leave lane to snipe free kills. Now onto the mid lane tier list. We have Malzahar, Vel'Koz, Ahri, Fizz, and nothing else because Lux got moved down to A tier. She is still a solid mid lane pick, but with the reduced utility she has after her W nerf, she can no longer just negate the lane phase and never die when combined with Aftershock. She can also no longer abuse the electrocute bug to bully lane, so with champs like Fizz and Ahri who are both popular and counter her in the meta, she'll be dropping down. She does still have that one-shot potential when fed, so don't feel like you need to drop her from your champion pool or anything. A new artillery mage approaches, and it's Peckinwell's pick of the patch, Xerath. He says that giving Xerath 5000 range at all ranks makes his ult presence in early lanes very strong. He uses Comet, Mana Flow Band, Transcendent, Scorch, Magical Footwear, plus Total Biscuits. Be sure to use every auto every time your passive is up to get mana back, and mainly focus on using your Q to poke. Don't really use W as much as he has mana problems, unless you're looking to all in or have your mana flow plus Comet proc up. He says that after 6 you should look to top and bot occasionally to see if you can possibly get some picks off with your ultimate if they're low under tower. The rest of the tier list changes go something like this. Swain in A tier due to his Q range buffs, Aatrox back to B tier as the loss of his revive wasn't as impactful as people thought. Aurelion Sol to B tier as he's an amazing champion if you master him and one-trick him, he's just hard. Rumble from A to B, and lastly Sylas to the graveyard because he's a lot harder to play with just a magic shield and people be hard feeding on him for the most part. Moving to the High-ELO mid lane list, the S tier roster is going to be Talon, Katarina, Akali, Aurelion Sol, and Ahri. Since we have a lot of changes, let's go over who moved down first. Rumble moved down to A tier once again due to the nerf to his shield. In A tier, we have Nico and Aatrox moving down to B tier due to their nerfs last patch, while TF, despite his new build, is having trouble matchup-wise with control mages like Cassio, Ori, Syndra coming back into the meta. Now, let's talk about champions that are doing well. Syndra is actually doing incredibly well Masters Plus even without the alt buff, so we believe she will make a comeback to A tier along with Fizz, who is incredibly broken at the start of last patch, but is now a very solid pick due to his amazing skirmish and gank setup post hotfixes. Last but not least, we have Aurelion Sol and Ahri making the jump from B to S tier. Those Aurelion Sol buffs ended up being a lot stronger than even A Sol mains thought they would be. Whenever this champion is at all viable, he becomes a top tier solo queue pick, and he even got some indirect buffs to items he likes picking up like Rod of Ages. Ahri, on the other hand, is a champion who is not considered good at very high elo, but has made a comeback thanks to her charm interrupting dashes. As an Ahri player myself, this makes her way too safe during the laning phase, as you don't even have to worry about ganks as long as charm is up. J4 can't gank you, Lee Sin can't gank you, Kha'Zix can't gank you, because you're just gonna cancel all of their gap closers. This also becomes true for all-in attempts from lane opponents like Fizz, LeBlanc, Akali, Talon, just to name a few. They're all not gonna be able to pull off their all-ins on you just because you're gonna interrupt their movement skills. I wouldn't even be surprised if someone like Rookie or Faker, who both love that champion, pick her up at competitive play soon. Some even say that Faker likes Ahri so much he won't retire until Riot actually gives him a world skin for her. Down in bot lane for the patch update, we have a buff to Lucian's ultimate, the Culling, where it does more damage at later ranks. This buff looks to help him out in a phase of the game he isn't that strong in, but won't be enough to make him a top tier solo queue pick. Vayne is getting quite a large buff to her condemned damage, and it is now going to deal damage instantly instead of after the knockback goes off. This means that Vayne's dueling and burst got a lot better in the early game, while also making it so she cross kills less often due to the delayed damage. Our starting roster for the bot lane tier list is going to be Jinx, Sivir, and Jhin in S tier. The only change to bot lane this tier list is going to be Hewitt's pick of the patch, Lucian, going from B to A tier. He says that Lucian's early game has always been amazing, but has had trouble scaling into the late game. It's common for Lucian players to snowball, then lose because the game drags on forever. His range makes it hard for him to deal damage safely in teamfights if he's not played in expert hands. The extra damage buff to the Culling only kicks in for the late game, but it will help him give an extra option to shred targets from a safe distance instead of just being a tickle. To really take advantage of the Culling, make sure you go for a high AD build, for example Bork into Essence Reaver, then IE, or Bork Essence Reaver then Cleaver, or my favorite, which is just full crit, where you have an Essence Reaver, IE, and a Zeal item. With no other changes, this gives me time to rant about Yasuo bot lane. It's actually extremely strong, and any G2 fan should know this by now with how badly Perkz has been face-smacking people around with it. The kill pressure it has on marksman lanes is extremely strong when paired with a lot of different supports that have knockups, such as Gragas, Rakan, Braum, Alistar, Volibear, or even mage supports like Xerath. If you are looking for a bot lane champion that always has agency in lane and doesn't have to rely on your support to win the laning phase, try this out. Once again, I take no responsibility for any feeding Yasuo bot laners in your games, especially if you're that Yasuo. For the bot lane high-elo list, we have Xayah, Kai'Sa, Draven, and Sivir in S tier. Kate swapped places with Sivir this patch due to her best lane partners Karma and Lux being pretty bad at the moment. This means that Caitlyn can no longer hard-win the laning phase as consistently as before, causing her big weakness, which is a lack of mid-game damage, especially from behind, to be exposed once again. A Caitlyn who's behind does pretty much negative damage to anyone who has armor or ninja boots. Sivir's gonna take her place in S tier because she's so good when it comes to synergizing with melee champions or against melee champions. Not only can Sivir delay the game with her wave clear easily versus low range comps, but she deals too much damage to clumped up dive heavy compositions. Okay, so I feel the need to put this in here because if I don't, I feel like the entire comment section is gonna talk about it. But yeah, Tristana mid is extremely popular right now, both in solo queue and competitive play recently. Personally, I think it's pretty good into passive mids like Corki or low wave clear mid laners like Kassadin, where she can just push and take plates easily, but she won't be on the tier list for now as her stats are just god awful and the sample size isn't that big yet, so stay tuned for the patch update if you want to find out more about solo lane Tristana. Support will be the last patch rundown, starting with Soraka, who got an extra 10 damage on her Q. This should help her maintain A tier and increase the amount of pressure she puts out during the laning phase, which is very important right now. Karma got a nerf to her empowered E-shield despite not being very strong in solo queue due to her showing up in competitive play as a solo laner both in top and mid lane. Poor Karma, both her old version and her new version just gets nerfed if it ever sees competitive play. The starting S tier roster for support is going to be Xerath, Brand, Janna, Nami, Blitzcrank, and Will's pick of the patch, Pyke. He says that Pyke is a great champion to climb with thanks to his ability to get picks and dominate the laning phase. He is a great champion to pick up due to his ability to easily snowball in low elo with people not paying attention to how much damage he can truly do or how easy it is for him to land his Q into E combo. Add to this that sweet buff he got to his ultimate income and he's getting items way faster than any other support on the Rift. Pyke is also really good against utility supports like Janna or engage supports like Alistar, so if you need a new support champion, give him a shot. As for changes to the list itself, we have Karma being thrown to the graveyard and Xerath moving from B to A tier thanks to Riot just liking him more and buffing his ultimate so that now he can even show up to skirmishes and impact the early game a lot more. But more importantly, we have Xerath and Brand moving to S tier for pretty much the same reasons. Both of these champions are mage supports that can easily 1v2 the laning phase while also being able to output the most amount of damage out of anyone on either team. This means that if you're looking for hard carry supports because you can't trust your AD carry, Xerath or Brand are good choices as they don't fall off late game and are able to win team fights or get picks on their own. If I were to choose one over the other, it would be based on Brand being slightly stronger and easier than Xerath below plat, while Xerath tends to be better than Brand the higher up you go. Also, Brand support has one of the highest average deaths out of any champion in the game, which is another reason I like Xerath more. So if you see a Brand Yasuo bot lane, that's going to be an average of 20 deaths a game, I'd consider dodging, or if they're on the enemy team, build a Medjai's. For the High-ELO S tier support roster, we have Janna, Nami, Rakan, Thresh, and the unbelievably good looking Brad. Before getting to the important changes, I'd like to briefly mention that Karma is once again being thrown off the support list while Xerath is taking her place in B tier. Yuumi dropped out of S tier due to her weaker laning phase after the nerfs to it last patch. She's still a strong champion and you'll see her in competitive play because her scaling is still insane, but in solo queue right now, laning is king. And now that her laning is weaker, she'll actually have to rely on her AD carry to win the laning phase. El Bardo makes it to S tier as one of the strongest solo queue supports. His ability to roam and impact the map is amazing while also being a lot stronger in lane due to the HP buff he got last patch, allowing him to survive all ins. Even outside of the laning phase, he is making plays left and right, being able to use his ult for picks or engages, or even stalling the enemy divers. In High-ELO in particular, his E can be used to sneak objectives like dragons or barons without the risk of people getting stuck in the pit, giving him all the tools he needs to be the cheesiest and most troll S tier pick. Thanks for watching our tier list video for patch 9.15. Feel free to leave in the comment section below what ELO you think some of the clips are from, and I'll reveal the answer during the update video next week. And as always, if you have any questions, also leave them in the comment section below, or go to our Discord server in the link provided where you can ping me in our Discord discussion channel. Don't forget to try out Mobalytics today at mobalytics.gg, and I'll see you summoners out on the Rift.